I've just done that. So, okay, so everybody's aware that this is the meeting of the ACNVT. It's Saturday, the 25th of February. I'm Peter Halley, the chairperson. I just recited the names of the voting members, and so we have a quorum. Just remember that this is being recorded. We are proceeding according to the current Massachusetts law that allows us to have virtual meetings of this nature, public meetings. The meeting was duly noticed and published, and here we all are. So first, we've got a quorum, and do I have a motion to approve today's agenda? So move, Peter Kahn, second.
Second.
Don Green, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Looks like it's unanimous. That's good. Now, having approved this agenda, we're going to juggle it up a little bit, but we'll cover everything on it and add some things at the end. I'm actually going to try and see if we can keep this to an hour today, and I think that may be possible.
Excuse me, Peter, can we approve the minutes from the last meeting?
Yeah, that's the next thing. You didn't put in all on the agenda all of my extemporaneous comments. Yeah, but so the agenda, to approve the agenda, the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting? John Green moved. Gary Bella is seconded, and all those in favor signify by raising a hand. Anybody opposed? No. Okay, good. So we've got that. See. So I'm going to welcome any new members, but everybody has to get sworn in. And maybe at the end we'll kind of go around and introduce ourselves, but we'll do it at the end because Peter Kahn has to leave at some point about 20 minutes into the meeting. And so I thought we'd do what we need to do while Peter's here. So before we get to these bylaw discussions, what, if anything, do we need to discuss about the SGR working group, which had its meeting that we were meeting to sort of prepare for, postponed. But I think there are things going on in the background that everybody ought to be aware of. Or
well,
maybe.
I'm sorry, Peter.
Yeah.
Well, I think the immediate piece of news is that the meeting that was scheduled for for February 28th, this Tuesday, has been canceled. And apparently they never have meetings or town meetings when the kids are on vacation, and that's the school vacation week. So the next meeting won't be until March 14th. They are still gathering data. We haven't seen it. There have been some circulation. I mean, the other thing that's so crazy about this way this committee is set up in the open meeting law is we cannot communicate in any way within the group. It has to be through the moderator, mediator. So anyway, they have circulated. Some articles have been circulating. I guess can you hear me? There was a Las Vegas challenge to the Las Vegas STR, constitutionality of that, and that's it was found to be unconstitutional there. But again, all of these, I wouldn't take too much from that. All of these are so fact specific to the region, and there is a request for us to see more of STRs around the country, and obviously in Massachusetts in particular. And we're hopeful we're going to see that information again as part of the data gathering. But here we are in March of soon to be March of 2023, and we don't have any data, despite the fact that this thing started almost at least 9 months ago. So that's all I have. Kathy, you I'm sure have. Kathy's the one on top of all of this. So Kathy, what do you have?
Just a few other things. So one of just what we did last meeting was was go through an exercise where we looked at some of the potential policies that we had talked about, pending data which approves or disproves them. So we all did the exercise, and I think we have another link that we're supposed to do. We're supposed to pick another one to go through. So it's basically, if we were to pick that policy, what do we think? What do we think the problem would be that it solves? What are the data elements you'd need to prove it or disprove that it's a good policy? And then what are the intended and unintended consequences? So that we did 2 of them last week, which one was the week minimum rental and the other one was the real person ownership requirement. And I think this week we're using the same. What we're supposed to do for our homework is pick our own from that list we had and do the same exercise. I think that's what's going on. As far as the data, I did talk with Brooke. I had coffee with her while I was on island to get an update on where the data is from the town point of view. So they were supposed to have their statement of work finished a week ago Friday, and then they were supposed to circulate it to the short-term rental work group. Anybody who was interested to give them feedback on it. It's now more than a week after that due date. They haven't circulated it, so I have to assume they haven't finished it, which means to me it's going to be delayed. So that's not official, but I can't see it being any other way. I believe that the NAREB data is moving along, so that may be available. And then I also mentioned to Brooke that after 2 years of requesting from the online platforms to get their Nantucket data, they finally gave it to us. So I have data that was shared. Basically, it's all the VRBO and the Airbnb data for the past several years, and we gave them the same data element list that the short-term rental group had approved, and so that's what they gave us, and they gave it to us for free. So I was talking to Brooke, hoping they weren't going to pay for something that we already had, if they could get it officially. And what they do is they have data that Airbnb and VRBO and anybody else always automatically sends to an independent aggregator that depersonalizes and deduplicates the data. That gives them the right to request it back, which is what they did. So it's all the town needs to do is get permission from that data aggregator to have the data, and they should be able to get it. Because it can't come from Nantucket Together. People will think we made it up or something. So that's going on in the background too, hoping that it moves forward. So that's the only things I had to add there.
Kathy, can I just respond to that just for a second? I don't understand, Kathy, if Nantucket Together is able to get this data, what's taking Granicus so long? That was what Granicus was supposed to be getting.
Granicus won't use those data sources. They scrape it themselves. They use their own algorithms to get the data, which is not, it means it gives you the data the day you ask for it, you can see it, but it doesn't give you anything in history. So they'll never be able to get that data in the past, which is what we need. What was it like 3 years ago and so forth. So hopefully they can put them all together and they'll have it. And the data, so this key data is the aggregator. And the reason that they're independent is they actually sell that data so that the platforms put it in there. And then if you are an investor, for example, you can purchase that data and see. So that's really what it's for. It's for investors, but it's very interesting. It didn't show anything that surprised me. It sounded like what we all thought was happening. So, you have the COVID impact on short-term rentals, the size of them, the amount of days typically they rent is averages about a week. Shorter in the off season, wedding season and so forth, and longer in the summer. So I don't think there's anything in there that would be controversial. It seems to. So hopefully they'll be able to connect up with them and get the data. So.
Is there any plan? Because getting the data in is one thing, and getting the data out to the public is another. And is there any plan for publication of the data or publication of the data plus whatever tools one would need to, look and analyze the data themselves?
I don't know how they're planning to present it. I don't know if they're going to give us like database or a spreadsheet we can play with. I don't know how they're going to do it because we haven't seen the statement of work that the town is writing. It's all a very opaque process.
Yeah, they still haven't put this thing out to bid yet. I think it's like, it's we're in for the long haul here. This is
Yeah. So here's the scary part is that, my concern is that that although the town has come out and we have come out and said, please don't vote on these STR articles, give the short-term rental group time to do their work. People may have no particular patience for that or not care. And they could go ahead and vote any one of these articles in, and then what do we do? Now we have no plan B if that happens, because whatever we do probably would be in conflict with that new thing. So it's going to be difficult to move forward. So that's my concern there, that would happen, and then what do you do?
Is there
People are
any data,
impatient.
is there any data that is available so far that would tell one anything about the electorate and their relationship to short-term rentals? In other words, we know that, between 500 and 1,000 people show up to these town meetings. Do we have any idea what percentage of eligible voters in the town are involved in the short-term rental business themselves?
Well, only about 20% of the homes that do short-term rentals are owned by year-rounders. So it's a very small percentage of the overall population of homes. So if you say there's 2,000 homes and they have 20%, so what's that?
400.
Somebody do that. 400 families. So maybe there's 400 families on the island. I spent all the past 2 weeks actually just talking to year-rounders, because it's really funny. They have a reverse hibernation cycle. They come out in the winter when everybody's gone. So they're everywhere. You run into all sorts of people in town, in the grocery store, that you never see. So I was just talking to people just to see what they thought and what they were, interestingly, that, what we heard in the public group, which says we don't want to get rid of traditional vacation rentals. We just don't want the investors coming in that have no connection to the island. That's all we want to get rid of. So there seems to be a lot of consensus on that real person thing across the board. And I think if something like that came out, along with something that would stop the lawsuits, everybody would be happy. But we need, I think, as the short-term rental work group needs to somehow convince the public that we may have something in front of us that could work and would be a middle ground and people would be happy with it. Maybe that's not the last restriction that you put on, but it's certainly the fear that everybody has. And it doesn't even matter if there's only 5% of them or whatever the number is now, because the potential is it could be 20% next year. So that's the fear. And that's what people seem to feel. We don't want to get rid of that. We don't want to, we don't want to put you guys out, because we know that our economy depends on you, but we don't want the investors. So I think that's what I was hearing everybody say that had an opinion. So
yeah. So
the numbers you had that you just referred to, are you saying that 80% of the units that are rented 1 week or more in short-term rentals are owned by non-voting taxpayers, whether those taxpayers are individuals or corporations?
Yes.
So that our constituency makes up the bulk of the short-term rental market.
Yeah.
of those actively involved,
Doesn't surprise me, but it surprised the numbers as well.
yeah, but remember that 80% does not mean that 80% of the non-voting taxpayers are involved in the short-term rental and indeed it would probably be, I don't know what the percentage is because I haven't worked this out in my mind, but
Peter, the percentage is like this. There's 9,500 taxpayers on the island, of which 2,500 get the discount, are locals. So there's about 7,000 non-voting taxpayers. And what Kathy is saying is that 2,000 of those 7,000 are the ones that do short-term rental.
Right, okay, that's exactly the comparison I was looking for, Gary, thank you. So I just wanted to make the point in case Jean's point was that there's a huge swell of non-voting taxpayers who 80% of non-voting, that's really 25% of non-voting taxpayers have some interest one way or the other. And we don't know about the other 75% right now, although a number of us who don't do short-term rentals are involved in this group. And, you know, I'm sure everybody has opinions. I have my opinion, and it will come out at some point in case it hasn't been obvious. Okay, so does anybody else have something to say about short-term rentals that is really important for today's meeting? Otherwise, we'll move on to the two pieces of proposed legislation. And then at the end, I think we will go to this other issue very briefly that was raised in some circulating comments about future participation. How do we beef up participation by people in this committee? That'll be sort of the last thing of the day, other than when is our next meeting. So hearing nothing else on short-term rentals, I thought a reasonable way to proceed, we have two bylaws, outdoor lighting and motorized passenger devices. And why don't we just take them in that order? First issue is do we have a member of this group who feels strongly about outdoor lighting one way or the other, who would want to propose a motion that we, you know, support or don't support, or just, you know, not even pay further attention to this particular bylaw? So we only spend time discussing it if somebody thinks we ought to do something about it. Gary.
Yeah, I'd like to give you my comments on it. I think that this lighting law is well-intentioned, but I think it would be a real burden on the town of Nantucket. The law is so technical that nobody understands what lumens are and how you know, and I see that the town is kind of pushing, you know, so that they don't have to enforce it. There are, you know, permitting requirements. With all of the stuff that has to go on, and with all of the shortage that we have in being able to have a sound infrastructure on the island of Nantucket to get our daily business going, the thought that we would have to have some additional requirements that take a lot of administrative time and certainty, to me, is a burden that I don't think Nantucket needs to at this time. There are no communities in Cape Cod or on the islands, and hardly any in the whole state of Massachusetts, that have adopted this law. It's well intended, but it's so technical, nobody understands what it means. It'll never be enforced. People don't want somebody coming up to them and saying, I don't like the way your lights are, I'm going to sue you, or I'm going to take you. I mean, to me, it's overkill. And I think Nantucket has too many of important issues that need to be dealt with directly to support our infrastructure, talk about coastal resilience and things like that. So I would not like us to support this. I certainly would not vote in favor of it.
Kathy.
So I don't know if everybody got to read the revised version that I sent out. It didn't get out till last night because I was traveling, but it's in a nutshell. What happened was that the FinCom, who does all of the, they're the ones who majorly weigh in on things, had the submitter come back and said, you know, we see you have the Nantucket Civic League, you have a few neighborhood associations, you have a whole bunch of places in town that gave support, you know, significant support to it. They said, we like the concept of it. You know, we need to update our outdoor lighting bylaw because the information and the way you measure things isn't current anymore. So, but we can't abide by the enforcement side of it. So what we'd like you to do is to come back with a revised version that's basically it's a guideline. It's not going to be enforced, It's just a guideline, and it just gives the regulation, which if people want to comply, they can do it. It doesn't cost much to do it. It's actually, even though it's very, very technical, it's just shielding the light that goes up, not anything else. So she did take all of that out, so there's not going to be any kind of cost associated with it or any enforcement issues with it. So I think as a concept, it's, to keep the skies where you can still see the Milky Way and so forth. It just gives the guideline, it gives the rules that you need to follow if you choose to comply. So I think the town is for it. And I don't think they would have asked her to come back and make the changes if they didn't want to find a way to have it pass. So I would vote for it.
Ralph?
I don't get to vote, but I would, and I respect your perspective, Gary, on the previous version of the bylaw. I think I do understand it, despite the technical aspects of it, but it did take me reading it 3 times to get there. And that's okay, because I think now the purpose is that it's just attempting to raise the bar. It's raising consciousness, and that's actually pretty good. Seatbelt laws are an example of something that was not very enforceable, but it raised the bar. It might take a generation to do that. So it's a very good guidance, and they pleased me by removing the stuff about impact on health. But I now see it as something that doesn't cost a lot. It will be enforced only if your neighbor complains, I suppose. And but the restrictions are mostly removed. So I would be, if I could vote, I would be in favor of it, endorsing it.
Yeah, Peter Kahn?
Yeah, I agree with what just Ralph said and Kathy. I mean, I think this is what I would call a sense of the Senate kind of resolution. It's simply now that the enforcement mechanism is out, and I must confess I have not read it closely since it came in last night, but assuming that all the enforcement is out, one of the great things about Nantucket, I think we all generally agree, is to the extent you can get out there at night. We used to be, you can see you see the stars. You take your kids out there and you look. But and it doesn't, as long as it doesn't interfere with people significantly, and this doesn't appear to do that. It just recommends that you keep your lights shining up, shining down rather. I don't see a problem with it, so I would vote for.
Yeah, let me just ask a question, then I'll recognize other people. I did not have a chance to read this. I planned to read it this morning before the meeting, but other things came up that got in the way. So as I recall, in the version we looked at the last time, you basically had to go to the HDC or somebody to get approval, and listing all the lights and whatever. That's all gone?
Yes.
Okay.
All the permitting section is gone on new construction and existing. So it's really, you can make it a complaint and there will be a compliance officer, but there's very little that can be done.
And then in terms of if your lights were installed before passage of this, is there now a 5-year, a grandfathering period, or what about those lights?
Still 5 years.
Still 5 years. So that's a possible source of a problem. And presumably those lights, however, would they fall under the previous? So if they violated the previous lighting ordinance, would somebody be able to, have some enforcement of that? Because I think that's a rational problem.
Peter.
Yeah.
One of the sections, section H at the end, 101H, says nothing in this chapter shall be construed as limiting the right of any person or entity to pursue legal action against any other person or entity under any of the provisions of this applicable law, including the doctrine of nuisance. So we're giving people the right to say, okay, I'm going to, and there still is an enforcement officer, which is on the payroll somewhere.
Right.
As part of this law, but it gives people the right to have civil litigation against it, and it makes
Well,
clear.
that always existed. You could still do that. I mean, you could do that today. I think, I mean, again, I don't have a problem putting this off one more week or one more session so we can all read because I haven't read it either closely. But what I understood this to be was simply to update the lumens, whatever the technical side of an already existing law. If that's the case, then I don't see a real problem. And at the same time, it does educate people to a problem, much like, as Ralph said, to the seatbelt issue.
Yeah, Don Green?
If I stand on my back porch, what so-called light pollution is coming from town. So, the simple things of letting businesses know about that and what they can do to shield, I think they would be open to that. As for neighbors doing things, I don't think you should be going to the law before you talk to your neighbor. I mean, we seem to be isolating ourselves more and more as this country evolves. So your light is, I'm sensitive to your lighting, and can I help you to reduce its effects? The law is substituting for neighborliness. And also, I agree with everybody that its enforcement is very difficult. And whose truth are you going to listen to when somebody makes a complaint?
Anybody else have a point? Scott? Your mic, turn your mic on. Yeah. Still off.
There we go.
There you go.
I think it's well intentioned, but a couple of things. One, I think it's a really bad idea to have bylaws that there's no mechanism or really intention to enforce. If we're going to add a bylaw to the town, it should be a real bylaw. But not good public policy to add stuff that is just hortatory. As a guideline, just fine. Secondly, I think I was surprised in the discussion a couple of weeks ago to hear that the town, even away from enforcement, is not enforcing its own guidelines on itself. So that would be a pretty good place to start. And the overall intention, though, I think is fine as a guideline, but to have this as as a model code that's there and but doesn't really count doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Could I comment on that, Peter? Actually, it didn't remove all enforcement. There is still enforcement. There are still violations. There's still a compliance officer, and there's still civil penalties. What was removed was all of the stuff about permitting and appeals. So any new construction is not going to have to go through a permit and an expense. So I'll give myself as an example. I have uplighting on my house and on my trees. It probably, because it's 8 years old, it probably exceeds the lumen limit, and it might be the wrong correlation color. So I would be moved, reading this, to revise downward my light bulbs and try to shield what I can shield, but I wouldn't get rid of anything. And I'm not worried about my neighbors calling me out. I'm not worried about a compliance officer coming to my house either, because there's no way 9,000 houses are going to be covered by one lonely compliance officer. Doesn't really have a big stick. So I think its impact on me would be to change my behavior somewhat voluntarily at very small cost. I think that's the outcome of this. There's no big permitting cost. There's no team of light officers around the island.
Yeah. When I look at this, I've tried to boil down what it's all about, and this is my my shorthand. Lights should aim down. They should not be in your eyes. If you have lights that aim up, the wattage needs to be limited. And there's a color temperature issue. Although I remembered when I had some landscape lighting done many years ago, they had what were known as moonlights. These are ones you place 100 feet up in the tree and they shine down. they're 4,200K, not 2,700K, but no big deal there because you don't have a lot of very tall trees in Nantucket in any event. But as long as the basic notion is what I just said, I don't have a problem with it. I did some renovations last year, and I think I changed 22 outside lights in the house, so they only shine down. And actually, I was happy with that. I did it because I didn't want the whole house glowing. I just wanted to have ambient lighting so I didn't trip. And so I think this is getting to be in the range of reasonableness. But so I guess the question is, does anybody, do anyone who have a motion one way or the other? If not, should we be putting this off another week, or should we just forget it? We can go in any direction that that the group wants to go in. Bill Sherman.
I'd like,
I would
to
move-
move that
okay.
excuse me, I would like to move that we indicate our support for the article, and as it has been sent to us in the latest iteration, when you spoke of Peter coming just recently.
Is there a second for that motion? It's a motion to support the current version of Article Warrant number 76. Is there
Second,
a second? Kathy is the second. Any further discussion? Jean?
Most of the people who are going to vote on this have indicated on a recorded line that they have not read the document. So I think it's inappropriate to vote on something that has not been, at least people indicate that they have read. It's just seems to me to make the whole vote foolish, in my humble opinion.
Jean, it is just inappropriate to call out our ignorance. It's, but you have a good point.
I agree, except if it's on a recorded line.
And I'm trusting for myself. I'm trusting those who have read it, who have earned my trust over the years. So I'm prepared. But Bill Sherman, you're the mover.
I have read it, and I think well of an article that is in nature regulatory, even if enforcement is problematic. There is a sense that people get from the expression, if it gets approved at town meeting, that that is the way that one ought to conform, even if it doesn't get total compliance. It's still a useful indication of community sentiment.
Okay, is there, so I guess we have a motion that is pending. We have a suggestion that maybe it should be postponed for another reading, so to speak, of this, but nobody's made that motion. Does anybody want to call the question or move to amend or whatever? Don Green. Turn on your microphone.
I move to table this motion until members are very well informed about the article's content.
And the being not a parliamentarian, we have a motion to table. I think we need to take that up before we can act on the motion, or is that appropriate? Anybody have a good idea about that? Bill?
I think it's non-debatable, and you just call the question.
Okay, so on motion to table, right? Non-debate. Okay. Is there a second on the motion table? We need that. There's a second, Gary Beller. Okay. All those in favor of tabling signify by raising your right hands, and those people who can vote. So 1, 2, 3, got 3. four. We have four. All those opposed? Tabling, we got two. So we will take this up at our next meeting. Bill, I appreciate the motion. Jean, I appreciate the moment of truth for all of us. And we'll take this up. Hopefully there won't be, when everybody is comfortable that they've read it and understood it, who can vote, that we will be able to conclude this episode with this particular bylaw. But thank you. I think a good discussion, and now I'll read it and see if you were all telling me the truth. Good.
So
Kathy?
quick question is, when does the select board, I'm trying to look it up now, when did they actually, we advise the select board, so if we advise them after they've already taken their stand, is that just a waste of time?
The answer is I don't think so. If it turns out that we're all in favor of it, or that a majority is in favor of it after the fact, and the select board acts favorably on this, it will not have been a waste, and it'll be noted for the annual town meeting.
Okay.
But I do think that we have, the people who want to table have tabled it, and that we ought to honor that
Oh,
vote.
I'm not questioning that. I'm just curious as to why, does it still matter if they've already taken their stand without our input? That was just a question.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think we can discuss that the next time if somebody wants. I think because it's been tabled to the next meeting. And I don't know that I guess the motion is still a ripe motion to act on the next meeting without further ado.
Kathy, it will just be, no matter what the outcome of this committee's decision, we would just be listed like the list that we got yesterday of of organizations that support. We'd just be listed amongst those. And we might have at town meeting, we might have a special classification because of being an advisory committee to the select board, but our support or non-support will be listed.
Yes, but sometimes the select board takes into account the letters it gets from various organizations that are either supporting it or not supporting it in their decision. And they may not have anything from us that's all because I don't know when they stop looking at it, when they say we're done. That's all.
I mean,
forgot it did.
if you like, it would not be Bill Sherman. Go ahead.
I think in a formal way, the next meeting, one would have a motion to lift from the table so as to get it into discussion again. But the simple thing is just to put it on the agenda.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we'll do that. And I think if it makes any difference, I think we could write to the select board and say, we considered it, but we didn't have enough time to review and
Revisions.
it's on our agenda for the next meeting or something like that. I'm not sure that's going to help them or harm them, because right now we don't have a position.
Right. Got it. It's just a question. That's all.
Yeah.
Got
And
it.
I don't think the select board is waiting with bated breath to see how our committee is going to vote on this issue. Unlikely that they give much of a darn about how we come out on this particular issue.
I don't know about that, Gary. People keep asking me, they say, what does Gary think about this? And,
That's different than the select board.
anyway, yeah, none of those people are on the select board. You're right. So let's go on to the bicycle, motorized passenger devices bylaw, Article 72. So the same thing. Does anybody want to move to support that, to oppose it, to support it with amendments, proposed amendments, to comment on it to the select board in any way? Because if nobody wants to do any of those things, we don't have to waste a lot of time on it. Yeah, Gary Bella.
I thought we were still waiting to see how the roads committee was going to come out. on this particular issue. I don't know if they've conferred yet, but there was, when I think about this issue, one of the, you mentioned, Peter, in one of your notes that there was an accident on the island recently. Some kid got hit, right? And
Yeah, on a public road. I
On
think
a
it
public
at an
road.
intersection.
right, and one of the issues that I worry about for Bruce Mandel's, he's trying to do what he thinks is the right thing, but to take all of these people who are suddenly going to get on the public roads, on these one-wheelers, on these two-wheelers, on these e-bikes, that could really be a cause of a lot more of these kind of accidents from young people who will be forced off these these side roads. And to me, I hate to think of going all the way up to 167 the Fish Roar, whatever that place is, right? And have to be behind somebody on an e-bike going 18 miles an hour, or on a scooter type thing, because all of that traffic will have to be on public roads. And it kind of worries me that there'll be more injuries occurring as opposed to less. Bruce is worried about people getting injured on those paths, but I'm more worried about people getting hit by the cars who are going to be sharing the roads with all of these e-bikes and other strange kind of propulsion vehicles that are being invented every day.
Any other comments? Because I have a comment, but I didn't want to, insert myself. Scott.
It struck me the issue is more speed differential on the paths than it is mode of propulsion. And I would acknowledge that people on an e-bike are probably more likely to be going at high rates of speed than skilled cyclists, but we've all seen cyclists at 25 miles an hour on those paths. So I would just suggest that in addition to what I thought was a very good comment about forcing people onto the roads, that getting some sort of speed control, no matter the mode of propulsion, is probably more important to safety.
Yeah. Don Green.
Some things to note. Number one, people who use the bike paths usually don't have a helmet on.
They don't have a what?
Helmet on. They don't have a helmet on.
A helmet. Yeah.
These motorized vehicles, especially the bikes, are heavier and they're moving faster. The other thing, if you are a motorized vehicle, you have the same rights to the road as any other vehicle. And therefore, instead of riding an extreme right, where you think you're allowing people to pass you, they can't see you. If you have a motorized vehicle, you should be riding in the middle of the lane that you're supposed to be in. And people should have to learn more patience, that's all.
Okay, Donna.
Hi, in our last meeting, I did suggest that perhaps we could do a 5 or 10 mile speed limit, because that would afford more safety on your bike path. And if people want to go 18, as Scott was saying, 18, 25 miles an hour, then they have to respect the road, and they go on the road. And that way the bike path is safe, and those who want to go faster can go on the road.
But those vehicles don't have speedometers on them, and it's pretty unenforceable unless we have radar on island.
Okay,
Wow.
so let me address all this. Not that I'm the expert here, but I took all of 5 to 10 minutes this morning to understand what the status of electric bikes are and how one might think about this, and found out a little bit that might be helpful to all of us. First of all, this covers more than electric bikes, and my greatest concern is not the bikes, although the example here that was brought up by the proponent is that he and or his grandson had been hit by an electric bike driver out near Mattakit in the past. But it is the motorized roller boards, balance boards, that sort of thing. And I'll tell you why I have a different view of those motorized vehicles than I do with bicycles or segways. The Segway is this thing that you see policemen stand up on, and it has to do with my experience with snowboarders, and that is their range of vision, because you're standing sideways on the balance boards and the skateboards, you lose vision to whatever side your back is toward in some degree, and therefore it's harder for you to see people who you might crash into, and so that is a concern for me, and I think it's a big problem in the snowboarding industry, that a lot of the accidents happen on the somewhat blind side of the snowboarder. And I too had a son who was clipped by a snowboarder on their blind side when he was a small boy. He's now a ski patroller, so he survived. So I worry about those vehicles primarily. As for the motorized bicycles, what I've learned is there are perhaps 20 states that have some kind of law, which Florida is one, and Pennsylvania is another. Those are the two that I saw today in my 5 to 10 minutes. And what the rules that I saw suggest is a series of rules that might restrict speed, Donna, and I can't remember who. I think Don mentioned the weight of these bikes, or somebody mentioned the weight of the bikes. And so I think this is the Pennsylvania rule. It could be the Florida rule, but anyway, there is something called a Class 1 pedal-assisted motorized bicycle. And those apparently are designed so they can go no more than 20 miles an hour on the battery. They may be limited in order to be a Class 1 bicycle, I think, to no more than 100 pounds. So that takes them down weight-wise. It's not as light as a racing bike, but it could be. I don't know what bikes weigh, but apparently they're limited in any event to no more than 100 pounds, no faster than 20 miles an hour. And then the motors may not exceed 750 watts, and they have to have operable pedals on them. So leaving aside the skateboards and all the rest of this stuff, which I really don't know what to do about them, because I do worry about them being out in the road and all the rest of it. But it suggests to me that some sort of a speed limit might be reasonable. And by the way, perhaps that speed limit ought to apply to, bicycles that are solely pedaled as well on those paths. And I feel for what we have is a limited resource, right? We have streets and we have bike paths, and then we also have sidewalks. And so you might have a separate rule for sidewalks downtown that are not walking paths. These things, as I recall, they were originally supposed to be bike paths, weren't they? And then it turns out everybody wanted to use them because they were the safest, the easiest way to get from place to place on the island. But I would be in favor of some, at least with bicycles. I think that, especially, I know I don't look like I'm more than 45 years old, but I think that one of these things could be in my future, and that's one of the persuasive factors. But that some way that older folks could stay on bicycles and use them in a safe manner and not be all that threatening to others. And so a combination of weight limits, speed limits, motor size limits, pedals, and all the rest, I think would be in order. I also frankly think that I don't know about all you, but when I get out on the bike path, I'm not sure what the rights of way are, what my obligation as a walker is. When I'm a biker, I certainly want to warn people that I'm coming, but I'd really like them to get out of my way, and so on and so forth. I think there should also be, just a series of expected sort of rights of way, rules of the road, whatever, that people should know and understand, so that we don't have interactions that end up with real problems, assuming people can act reasonably. Bill.
I'm very much in sympathy with what you just said, Peter. Just an observation, not getting into the particulars of an article. The notion in my head is the benefit of having an article that sets ground rules for use of the bike paths is that it helps to sort out liability if people are reckless. In other words, if the rules set by the town say you cannot have a motorized bike on the bike path and a motorized bike causes an accident, that's a factor in showing negligent operation contrary to town regulations. And then, in effect, you let people use their best judgment and understand that they have the risk if they don't abide by the regulations, that they may, if they cause an accident, be on the sorry losing end of a lawsuit or a claim.
Yeah. I think there's something called for in this area, and it requires some public education as well. And the other thought I had, because one of the things that Bruce said is that, he wasn't able to get the, everything happens very quickly, and he didn't know who had hit him or his grandson or whatever. But we live in this world of smartphones, and maybe the first thing you do is not pull out your smartphone, but it is not too hard for lots of people to be able to record things. And that may be helpful in sorting things out in the future. So I guess I would think that we probably do have something to say on this, but the question is, what do we have to say? And I'm certainly not in favor of anybody drafting a rule or regulation that looks like the prior night lights rule or regulation. Something really, really simple and clear, but that preserves the ability of everybody to share these walkways in some reasonable manner. Walkways / bikeways. And I am worried, as somebody put out, with all this stuff getting out on the street, being forced into the street, and creating a big problem for the riders and for the road rage factor of drivers.
Would this require all skateboarders to have to go onto the public roads instead of the bike paths?
Yeah, I don't even know if it's legal for a skateboard. I don't know what the rules are. If you're a skateboarder crossing the public road, that's one thing. If you're a skateboarder, going up and down the public roads, I have no idea, sitting here, whether you have a right to do so.
You're talking about electrified skateboards, though.
Yeah, I'm talking about electrified skateboards. I think they're all a problem, but the electrified ones, at least in my brain, seem to be a bigger problem. That's probably because I'm not a skateboarder, but which one of you is a skateboarder and has an electric skateboard and wants to speak in favor of them? Bill Gardner, were you raising your hand or stretching? Yeah, can't hear you. Donna.
I think the idea that you brought up, Peter, of education, I think is important because I don't think people are aware, many people are not aware of, let's say, courtesy on a bike path, or rules and regs. So I don't know how you go about it, but I think if people were more aware of, okay, I stay on the right side of the road from going one direction, the other way, a certain speed limit, if you will, but nobody knows anything because all these things have been coming up the last few years.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when I walk, I do a lot of walking. And
do
so when I walk near my house, and I was very thankful when they extended the bike paths down to the end of my street, that made it a lot easier. But, you know, I just know when somebody, Bill Gardner, I'm going to get right to you. When somebody comes past, I would like them to slow down. I'm happy to even step off the bike path to let people pass when I know they're there. And everybody is constantly yelling to your right or to your left, and it's usually my wrong right or left. So I'm not sure which way to step. It's always a problem, but we need some better education for ourselves and for other people. Bill Gardner, and you have to turn on your microphone. Yeah.
Yeah, I did. Thank you. I wasn't trying to reach you earlier, but I am now.
Yeah.
I too am a walker, and I walk on the bike paths. And if I hear somebody coming, or if they say on your left, that's fine. I move over. I see very little friction between the walker and the biker. But you get these electric skateboards or whatever you call them, like scooter, that can go faster. I'd rather have those things on the bike path and have everybody try to be more careful because there's now another mode of transportation there than having those things on the public roads. I mean, I'm with Gary. It's bad enough when you drive out to Pulpus Road, which I do, that you've got these motor scooters, which don't go 35 or 40. You get a line of cars behind a motor scooter. That annoys the bejesus out of me, but I don't want those motor scooters on the bike paths. But on the bike paths, I don't think that having those little electric things that barely go faster than a walk, you know, we can accommodate that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think speed is an issue, basically, and also, Don, I'll get you next. You know, I also sort of see differences in different parts of town. You know, downtown in the historic district might be a different situation than out where I am, where there's more sort of open bike path, and so on and so forth. But I think the current proposal is sort of draconian, overly simplistic, and I guess the other thing is, according to one thing I read, about 10% of bike sales are now electric bike sales. So these are important recreational tools for people. But anyway, Don Green.
I just, in looking up things while everybody was talking,
Mhm.
Mike Burns has returned to town.
Okay, could you speak up a little bit? I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time
I
hearing
see
you.
that Mike Burns has returned to town.
Yeah, that was great. I saw that too. That's fabulous.
At a meeting, he could enlighten us on this problem and what he thinks.
Yeah, well, I'm thrilled that the town got him back.
Yeah, yeah. So is the suggestion that this is a transportation issue that should come through the transportation department, or I'm not?
Well, I think so.
Good
Yeah,
idea.
yeah. And that the transportation department should be, I mean, it should be something like the STROG, right? We should have a work group that comes up with sensible rules for this thing to be proposed and considered. Bill Sherman.
Just a comment, I don't think we have a transportation department. Probably go to the transportation planner. Hopefully that's Mike Burns coming back
Yes, it is.
in the planning department.
That's what we're talking about.
He's the guy that talked to us years ago, and he was really
Yeah.
kind of on top of things. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, good guy.
He was
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. Okay, so do we? What is the will of this group? Should we say something like?
We don't have to say anything on this, Peter. We don't have unanimity on this particular warrant that we want to either vote for it or against it. We think, you know, it ought to be in the hands of either the road committee or the transportation planner. So let's leave it to them. That's what my suggestion.
Well, I'm just afraid that if, this is in the hands of the town meeting right now. And Bruce Mandel is has turned out to be a very effective advocate for things at the town meeting. If for those of you that may not be aware, he was the sponsor of the, no plastic straws and no, I guess, throwaway packaging rules that came to pass, 3 or 4 years ago, against huge opposition. And I have no idea what the town's sense is on this issue. But I think in general, certainly our members use these paths regularly and use them in various ways. And this is I would hate to see a one-off banning of these other things, many of which I don't like, but I can learn to live with because we have limited space. We have these things called walking paths, and there's enough room on them, I think, for all of us if we behave ourselves properly. So I think I just elbowed my way. Okay, everybody's still here. I hit my keyboard with my elbow. Yes, Bill Sherman.
Just a quick comment. Think where we would be without the bike paths.
I know. It's and they were bike paths when they were originally built, right?
They were bike paths.
Yeah.
You walkers are now taking control over the bike paths,
Yeah.
not walking paths.
But we're happy to be on them, I must say. And, wish the bikers would stay off, but, we have to be reasonable. So what, do we have a motion one way or the other? I mean, Kathy?
I just wanted to point out and I'm not taking a stand one way or the other, was that during the hearing, the police said they can't do radar on a bicycle. It doesn't have enough of an image. So it would have to be one of those ones where it's just, here's the rules, and they really can't enforce it. So that's the only comment. I just wanted to make that.
Yeah.
But, enforcement doesn't necessarily have to be policemen using radar or whatever to and checking on things every day or what have you. There have been lots of cases where, for example, 40 years ago, I was putting in a system on the bridges in Philadelphia where people could get barcoded labels, pay by the month, and go through a quick lane. And it was determined that what are we going to do if people just go through without having gotten the label, or they let the label expire and then they go through? And the answer was, at the beginning of the month, you station a policeman there at the Ben Franklin Bridge, and he gives a ticket, and it gets played up in the newspapers, and it reduces people taking advantage of it because they're getting $100 fine instead of buying a $10 label. And so it's not necessarily active enforcement. It's just making the public understand what the rules are, and understanding that there is a penalty, a severe penalty, if you violate the rules. And not everybody is going to abide by the rules then, but at least I think you'll get a fairly large number of people who use them regularly.
Yeah, and I think that's right. For example, if I'm understanding what you're saying, and I think I do, I think we all do, so I hate to restate it, but it just, signs on the bike path will have an effect. And the signs could be slow, they could be, 20 miles an hour, whatever they are. Well, 20 miles an hour sounds like an awful fast speed for me. Yeah. But yeah, Donna.
There already is a sign. It says no motorized vehicles.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking, we have a lot of bike rental shops and services, so they could hand out pamphlets about suggestions, rules of the road or suggestions of the road kind of thing. So when people are renting these electric bikes and so forth, that's one way of getting it out to people, and also the visitor center, as well as whatever we do in town.
Yeah.
Yeah, but, you know, Young's and the other bike shops could care less. They'll hand it out. But for example, I know when I drive down when I come into Orange Street, normally I just look one way because vehicles are supposed to be only coming one way. Well, a lot of the people who rent bicycles don't realize that in a bicycle, you're supposed to, if you're on the street, you're supposed to follow the rule or the one-way direction that the cars are taking. So many a time I've almost hit a bicyclist coming the wrong way. And in most cases, they're rentals from Young's or one of the others. So it's all well and good, but I don't think that the rental shops really pay a whole lot of attention to what the rules should be.
Yeah, Steve.
Well, I mean, I used to work at the visitor center, and so I know people would come with bikes. You could also have the High Line and the steamship hand out to everyone who rents a bike, who brings a bike over, a little pamphlet with rules on them. But I agree with Gene, many people, including residents and non-voting residents, ride their bikes the wrong way on these one-way streets, and just regular bikes. So there are a ton of issues related to, you know, who are the pads for bicycles or pedestrians, and are they wide enough, and etiquette and common sense and liability issues. And I understand the frustration when you're driving behind a moped, but, you know, perhaps in terms of safety, we ought to remove mopeds from see if there can be an ordinance that would ban mopeds for safety reasons. But this is a huge issue, not just whether, you know, whether motorized vehicles could be on the bike paths.
Yeah, Donna.
Just a comment, Gene. There are always going to be people who are not going to pay attention, whether it's somebody driving a car or somebody on a bike or somebody on a moped or anything. But to address it to people who would be interested in following the rules if they were made aware of them, I think is helpful.
Yeah, I mean,
Don't get me wrong. I think it's
No, I know.
Give out
the wrong direction issue seems to me so solvable without making it not solvable, let's say making it better. Because we have all these semi, you know, the adjuncts that are hired in the summertime, and they could give out warning tickets or something to people going down the wrong way.
True. Yeah.
You know, there are little things like that can be done to help ameliorate those problems. But I think I get the sense that there's a lot of interest in this. There's a lot of perhaps dissatisfaction with the way in which Article 72 is written, that it needs to be attention paid to this area, and but there's not a lot of support for Article 72 as is. Is that kind of the sense of this group? And
Yeah.
so that, yeah. And so then the next thing is, what, if anything, do we do about it? Or we just, you know, see what happens?
Let's move on to the next thing. Otherwise, the meeting is going to go longer than you predicted.
Okay. So right. So let's not. I having heard no motion on this thing. Let's go on to the next point, which I think is just the perhaps the point that Donna and others brought up. I take it, are there any other ATM meeting warrants that we should be concerned about and discussing here? I can't think of any off the bat, but Kathy.
I just thought the one article we might want to lend our support to, I think the group would agree, is the one that makes it illegal to have the fractional ownership model
Yeah.
on your ticket.
Yes.
So that to me should be an easy one. And the
Oh, yeah,
town
yeah.
slipped that one in, that's Article 40. They put that in at the last minute on their own. So that one I think is one, maybe it's not an ACNBT issue, but.
Well, it can be if people want to voice one way or the other on it. So I have, well, I'm gonna, I don't know when the select board is going to take that up, but I will do what I would call the Briskman motion on this one, which is if we haven't read it and we haven't prepared, how can we vote on it unless it's so simple that everybody can easily understand it. Plus, I am a little bit concerned that perhaps we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we still have a quorum present. So is this something that we should speak to briefly at our next meeting?
Yeah, let's put it on the agenda for the next meeting.
Yeah, okay, good. So go ahead, Gary.
And I think
It was on this week's agenda.
it was on this agenda.
Yes.
It is. Well, I must say, I didn't, the problem was it was on the second page of this agenda, Kathy. Did anybody get to the second page?
We only do one page, sorry. I do, but it is very simple. It's like, it's one sentence, but yes. And by the way, it looks like it's March 20th or 25th when the select board does its final thing. So that, I just looked that up.
Okay, so we can have a meeting before that and maybe look at these two things. Wait a minute, I'm now back in. We need to do something about night skies. People just need to read and come to a conclusion. And as of right now, we're not going to do anything about the bicycling issues. Although I worry about that a little bit. I might bring it back up at the next one, and we'll look at Article 40. So that sort of brings us to the issue that Donna, I think, raised in an email, and that is how do we publicize that this group exists and that perhaps we can be helpful to non-voting taxpayers with issues that they have. This, Donna, is something we've been discussing virtually every year since I've been on this. And the various things that we've tried to interest the Inky in an article about the group, and I don't think that worked. The only way we got into the Inky very much was when others started attacking us as not being representative of non-voting taxpayers. Then we got our 2 cents in, but that didn't particularly light a fire under people coming to join us. I want to think about all the new members who are waiting to be sworn in. How did you learn about us, and was it through a personal contact? For me, it was, Bill Sherman. I met him at a meeting and he talked about this, and I said, oh, sure, I'd be interested in participating. Is it that kind of personal conduct? I think Kathy has been at going around to town meetings of various sorts and encouraging people to sign up and meet. I think Gary's done some of these things, and it's my sense when I've asked 5 or 6 people whether they're interested, and as soon as they hear that there's actually a commitment to come to meetings, they lose interest, because most people are up there to enjoy their time up there and not get involved in town government. Yeah, Steve.
When I first got to the island as a half-time resident in the probably 2008, 2009, there was a group that met once a year, I believe once a year in July or August in the Great Hall of the Athenaeum. And
Specifically, that's the
no, I thought it was I remember the term non-voting taxpayers, and there were some selectmen up on and some town officials, and they talked about issues. And as a new seasonal resident, I was interested in that. I went to that for a couple of years, and then it stopped. And I mean, I was invited to join this group by Peter Kahn, and I was aware of it, and I care about the island. I've been coming here for years, so that's how I got involved.
Steve, that particular presentation at the Athenaeum is done every year, and it was done this year as well.
Really?
But it was always co-sponsored, at least initially, it was co-sponsored by our committee and the Civic League. And then at some point, even prior to the time that I became chairman of our committee here, the Civic League kind of took it over. I don't know if the people who on our committee decided not to co-sponsor it or something, but ever since that time, it still exists every year. Civic League runs it, but we are no longer the named co-sponsor. Maybe it's something, Peter, ought to ask, Lee Sorkin, the people who run the Civic League, whether, we would appreciate being co-sponsor of that presentation. They may not want the competition, but that's how it used to be.
Mhm.
It never hurts to ask. Donna.
Gary, you said that that there was a presentation at the Athenaeum. Was it in the summer? I sort of missed that.
It's always in the summer. It's
I
always,
think that's,
it's always in July.
I think that's a very good idea for exposure, because it's something where many of us who are seasonal residents, I am one, are there. And I think that will increase the awareness in the community of our existence. I knew nothing about this committee until recently. I was online looking for something to do to get more involved in Nantucket. And I came across this, but people are not aware of it, I don't think. And there was an article, Kathy, Kathy is aware of it, she sent it to us, about, somebody was writing on letters to the editor this week, like, what do we do? Well, we're here, and I don't think people know about it. So it'd be lovely if someone on this committee would respond to the Inky, and maybe a few of us could even add to that and send our own letters. But I would defer to Kathy for that, or one of the appointed, because I'm not a voter yet.
Donna, when I was chairman of this committee, I actually went to the meeting at the Athenaeum, and I brought with me, and I took the occasion to stand up at some point during the meeting when the select board members were, and I stood up and I said, "We have this committee. I have applications."
Well,
So,
maybe it's time again to do that.
it might be
Coffee
something
and
that we would
coffee
do
and
again.
discussion.
One
or
of the
something.
members of our committee probably ought to do it again next year.
Yeah,
To go to the meeting and come with, with the applications. I assume we still have a few openings. I'm glad to see we have so many potential openings being filled, but maybe we still have a few more.
Yeah,
openings.
I think on that issue, I think, and we'll have to see how this all settles out, but I think we actually may only have one opening remaining, or 0 openings. I know one person just withdrew because they didn't have the time to commit to the meetings. And, quite frankly, if this open meeting law does not continue with this ability to meet as we're meeting today virtually, I am fearful that, first of all, we'll only be able to meet at some point during the summertime, and getting a quorum is going to be difficult because so many of us are in and out. This virtual meeting has made it far, far easier to meet on a regular basis, especially during this part of the year when none of us, I take it, would have been on the island except for Kathy, who abandoned the island yesterday. And we couldn't have, we couldn't have this meeting at a critical time when all these ATM warrants are being discussed. But but just to finish the point, I think we are either fully subscribed or just have one opening for a new member.
Well, still people could attend the meetings as with a point of view and express a point of view. They just couldn't vote. I guess, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. These are public meetings.
Right.
And there is a provision, certainly by the end of every meeting, and it just depends on, who's running the meeting, but my experience has been public participation has been welcome on virtually any matter that is being discussed, and people just need to be civil and, wait their turn. Gene.
A couple things. One, I agree with what Donna said. There was this letter to the editor in this week's Inky about non-voting taxpayers. And I think it's an opportunity for us, which we should take advantage of putting in a letter to the editor, which I'm sure under the circumstances, the Inky would agree to print. They don't print all letters, but at least that would explain to those people who bother reading the Inky what this committee is all about and that it does exist, et cetera, et cetera. So that's number one. I finally, yesterday or the day before, I guess it was, had my interview with Libby. It only took 3 or 4 months, and we couldn't come up with a joint date. And then we had a date and she got sick. So we finally met via Zoom. And she indicated that she didn't think there were any slots available, or maybe 1 or 2. I don't know whether she was sort of saying to me, that was a way of saying she preferred not having me, but that's whatever. I'm indifferent to that.
Yeah, no, I think I owe her an email, because I know of one retirement that she may not be aware of, and so I'm going to let.
I don't know how many how many members is this committee allowed to have? What is it?
15 by bylaw.
A bylaw. So if there are
And
15,
we have-
I've rarely
we have-
seen more than 6 or 8 people show up. So
Right.
We have 8, and there are 7 more who have submitted applications. The problem is nobody's a member yet because they can't get sworn in until they're on the.
Yeah.
So she's looked at she's had interviews with a number of people, and all of you, I think, who've had those interviews are waiting to get sworn in. That's. So
Anyway, I'll write her and tell her about this one retirement, and or basically a person who does not want to be reappointed, and so I think that person will drop off in June or something like that, and that will create that empty slot that I think we have. So hopefully you'll be okay. I haven't been able to keep track of everybody she's interviewing, because it's not like.
I believe, Peter,
Yeah.
we had 8 more people apply, but one of them is the person who said they can't do Saturday mornings.
Yeah.
So I think we're down to 7, and that makes 15. So if there's a retirement, that should even leave another opening, I think.
I think
forget.
that's right. So and then would somebody just send me the article that you're referring to? I read all these things and I think I've seen it, but that was all of maybe 3 days ago that the Inky came out, and it's already, past my mind. And indeed, if you have a little draft of what it is you'd like to say to them, you're welcome to say it, and say I'm a future appointee or something, and blah 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 blah, and or I'm happy to write it as well.
I think it should come from an officer of the committee, not from
Okay.
somebody
but-
like Donna and me, who are here by your good graces.
Peter, I wrote such a letter to Marion Stanton when I was chairman, and she actually published it. It didn't end up with a groundswell of people applying, but it did appear in the paper. I'll take a look and see if I can find it, send it to you so you can ghostwrite it.
Great.
Send it for your signature.
And the letters that I had one a year ago, I think, when on this Strog thing, when the one of the Monomoy residents was saying awful things about us. And what I learned is they don't like long letters. I had to write mine twice. You keep it short and sweet, and they generally will publish it as a response.
Peter, I'm happy to help you with it as a former newspaper editor many years ago. But I would think with the Inky, with the Current, and with Daybreak Nantucket, you'd probably get a letter in all of them. You agree it should be as short as it can. I have one question, and maybe Gary knows. Are there other municipalities or places that have similar organizations such as this?
Yes, there are on the Cape.
Yeah.
On the Cape?
Yes.
And we had another legislative proposal, and I contacted one or two of them to see whether they would support it. And I think it actually had to do with amending the public meeting rules to provide for meetings like this
Zoom
by
meeting, yes,
seasonal
yeah.
groups, and
Yeah.
it's not going anyplace, but there are other groups like ours, and they have similar problems to ours. Yeah, Donna.
Since I'm not sworn in, can I encourage someone such as yourself or Kathy or one of the appointed members to respond? And the deadline, I think, for the Inky is either Monday or Tuesday morning.
Mhm.
So it would be great if something could go in to provide a response in good timing.
Sure.
It's Tuesday at 4 p.m.
Yeah,
for the
and
Inquirer and Mirror.
so if somebody would just send me that, send me a proposed short, sweet response, I'd be happy to, do final editing and send it in under my own name, if that's what you all like.
Yeah.
Now, do you have the article, Eileen Doherty's article? Do you want me to? I thought I sent it out.
You
You
did.
did, you did.
Okay,
Send
okay.
it again.
Send it again.
Well,
Send
send
it
it to
again to Peter.
Peter.
It
Send it to
never hurts.
Peter.
It never hurts.
I'm signing off, Peter. Sorry. I gotta go.
Okay, so we have a motion to adjourn now? I think we've sort of run through and we're, go ahead.
So moved.
Gary makes a motion to adjourn. Any second? It's Kathy's second, and we've lost our quorum anyway.
Okay.
So we will adjourn at this point. Thank you all much. I hope I didn't cut
Thank you.
anybody off, but I think we've had
Okay.
some
Stay
discussion.
well, everybody. Stay well, everybody.
Be well.
Good rest of the weekend.
And we'll come out with some future date.